Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in to our live questions and answer session with Sinn Féin's leadership team. Gur míle maith agah as Fein, Freud to Roh Galéir, agus gur míle maith agah as na Ceisne Galéir. My name is Donnchadh. I'm the Sinn Féin education spokesperson and TD for Cork South Central. We have a very strong lineup for this evening's question and answer session. Our leader and Uachtaráin Sinn Féin, McDonald, Last Uachtaráin and Joint Head of Government in the North, Michelle O'Neill, and Pearse Doherty, Sinn Féin finance spokesperson and TD for Donegal South West. This evening is the eve of the easing of restrictions in the South, and it's clear we've over 1,000 questions this evening, and it's clear that people have, as well as some hope for the future, a lot of concerns, frustrations and worries about what's going to happen in the days and weeks ahead, and some uncertainty too. So with that many questions, we're not going to get to them all, but if they're not answered, we have a dedicated team to get back to you. And obviously with that number of questions, we'd be anxious to dive straight into it. So I'm going to start with some questions for our leader, Mary Lou McDonald. Two questions here. One that I know is a huge issue. I've been contacted on it in relation to women returning from maternity leave who are excluded from the temporary COVID-19 wage subsidy scheme, even though they're technically employees. Another question from Karen, who's worried her husband is returning to work on Monday, but she's afraid that he will bring the virus home. She's a high-risk individual.
Well, Gurmaya got Donnchadh agus Fáil Shélig. Thank you for joining us this evening. Those are two very important questions, Donnchadh, that have been raised with us. Let me start with the first one first, around those workers who have been out on maternity leave in receipt of maternity benefit and who find themselves excluded from the income support, the wage support scheme that the government introduced. This is obviously unfair. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that to discriminate against a person because they have been on leave to have their baby, to discriminate against them in any way when they come back is unfair. I know many people have questioned whether or not it also breaches the spirit and the letter of all of the equality legislation. So anyway, long story short, this needs to be fixed. I have written to all of the party leaders, including the Taoiseach, and Pearse has been in touch with Paschal Donoghue, the minister. We have set out for them our very clear view that the scheme can be amended, but on an administrative basis. What I mean by that is the government are saying to us, Donnchadh, well, this is terrible for these workers, but we can't do anything because we need new legislation. That's not actually true, because the government on a previous occasion actually made a change to this scheme when they raised, do you remember, from 70% of income protection to 85%. So they can do it. They did it before and we want them to do it again. So they instruct the Revenue Commission to alter the scheme to ensure that these workers aren't excluded and aren't discriminated against. And then at a later date, the amendment to the legislation can be made. And for us, that's just a common sense way to proceed. And I have to be honest with you, I'm a little bit at a loss as to why they haven't just done this. I mean, why cause that kind of distress for families, for the woman and her whole family circle, the partner or spouse who just have a new baby in their home? Why cause that level of hardship? And obviously for us as women, we won't tolerate any form of exclusion or discrimination. You know, those days are over. So it can be fixed, and we've written to government and we're insisting that it's fixed quickly. The second question, I think, is equally critical now as we open up across the island to some form of easing of the public health restrictions. We have to be safe. Workers have to know when they go to work that they are safe, whether that's in the provision of personal protective equipment, whether that's in ensuring that rostering is done correctly so that social distancing, you know, that physical distancing can be respected, whether it's ensuring that you have adequate wash-up facilities, you know, plenty of warm water and soap and all of that. And I can really understand people's concerns as their loved one you know, their partner or their son or daughter might be returning to work tomorrow, because there is a real worry. Will this person be safe? And then the other worry, are they going to bring the virus home? So protocols and standards have been agreed for workplaces. Let me say this very clearly. They have to be fully and rigorously implemented, and that has to be regulated and overseen. David Cullinan, our colleague from Waterford, and myself had a meeting with the Health and Safety Authority on Friday. We've raised the issue of resources with them because we're anxious that they have the tools and the personnel to carry out their role. They tell us that they're on a promise of more resources from government. I very much expect that will be honoured. And can I just say to everybody who is going back to work, have your wits about you, keep your eyes open, and you see if something's wrong, say it out loud, step up and say it, because there will be no winner at all, not people in business. And let me just say, most employers will go to no end of trouble and care to protect their employees. It's important to recognise that. Others, unfortunately, won't, but there's no winner if the proper safety and protection measures aren't in place. So people shouldn't be shy about that. It's the only way that we're going to really build confidence in our capacity to exit and in our capacity to get people back to work. So a lot hinges on public confidence that we don't just have guidelines gathering dust on a shelf somewhere, but that in construction sites and factory floors and every other setting, that people are genuinely safe. And then their people at home, their family at home will have that sense of confidence. So it's steady as we go. I know these measures have been really hard. Everybody wants to get back to work. I totally get that. We have to get back to work. We need to support workers, families and businesses to make that happen. But it absolutely has to be safe. So where the rules and the standards aren't being met, people need to say that out loud. You need to use the relevant phone lines and the mechanisms in your workplace to blow the whistle, if you like, and to make sure that you are actually safe. That's what this is all about.
Absolutely. And I think if we're to move from phase to phase, the safety of employees is going to be crucial. And I think that also trade unions probably have a key role to play in the coming weeks and months as well. Michelle, I have a question in here from Paul, and obviously the executive, it's roadmap last week. So Paul just wants to know what that's going to mean and what it's going to mean for him and his community. We have a number of other questions as well. BBC reported in April that a pilot scheme for test and trace would begin the following week. And I want to ask, or Elizabeth wants to ask you what your view of that is. And there's also a question here in relation to the lack of support for substitute teachers in the north. They haven't been supported under the furlough scheme so far.
Yeah, thanks, Donnchadh, and thanks everybody for tuning in. This is important for us because we like to keep in touch with everybody, and we know that people have many questions right now, and we've seen that from the level of questions that have been submitted to us. On the issue of substitute teachers, there's a cohort of teachers that were left out of previous schemes that have been developed, and Sinn Féin have been leading the way in terms of raising this issue. Karen Mullen, who's our education spokesperson in the north, has raised this consistently with the education minister, and I'm fairly confident now that after a lot of deliberation with the finance minister, Conor Murphy, that we're going to see a positive resolution to the issue of substitute teachers, and we'll keep people posted of that in terms of whenever we're able to get that information and get that over the line, because it's important that we support those teachers. We have published the Pathway to Recovery document in the north last week, and it's been fairly well received, because I know that people are craving information right now, and they want to know when things are going to get better, and they want to know where's that wee bit of chink of light in the light at the end of the tunnel. And the Pathway document sets out like 5 steps of how we're going to move our way through this, all the way guided by the science, because remember, we're going to have to live with COVID-19 for some time, and it's important that as we live with it, that we learn to be very safe in work, safe at home, that we make sure that we protect people. So I think that the approach that we've taken is not about being led by dates, it's about being led by the science, but also alongside that, and really importantly, it's really important that we have a full test, trace and isolate system in operation, that we're providing universal testing across the board, that we're focusing on areas like nursing homes, that we're doing all that we can to make sure that we do live safely as you can do with COVID-19 out there in society.
Absolutely.
I think the other issue just was the third question was about the tracing pilot, which is up and running. It's very much being ramped up. I'm very grateful to Rugby, all offering their services, all coming forward and asking, what can we do? I think there's one thing that definitely astounds me throughout all of this is how good society is, how good people are. Everybody wants to play their part, and there's a part for everybody to play because we are all in this together.
I think we have seen really the true value of community, and it's extraordinary how people have responded, but it's also true that people are finding this very tough and people are making big sacrifices. So I think that hope is important, but obviously it needs to be grounded in the science and in making progress on the safeguards. A question for you, Pearse, there from Gavin, and I think he probably speaks for an awful lot of other people in a similar situation. He's a small building contractor. He feels let down not only by the CIF, the Construction Industry Federation, but by the government, because the main focus has been on large money-making sites. There's no clear line for the small people. So he's looking for clarity on when and if small construction sites can operate.
Yeah, thanks, Donnchadh. Well, like many business people, our office has been inundated by people asking for clarity. Can they now go back in phase 2 and phase 3 and phase 4? And there's no streamlined centre where they can get that information. At this point in time, it's quite vague, and that's causing a lot of confusion and anxiety for employees and for workers. In relation to construction, this was an area where there was a lot of confusion because it was said in stage 1 it was outdoor construction only. And anybody knows who's involved in construction. If you're building a house, you start outside and you move inside to do the plumbing, the first fix, the electricians, and so on and so forth. We have had clarity during the week from the Minister that that type of activity is allowed in phase 1, but it is not allowed for new types of construction. So, for example, if you're talking about an extension to a house, then you can't go in and start that in phase 1. But if you're building a new house and you're resuming that type of work, and a part of that is indoors as part of the site, then yes, you can participate in that type of work. So there is still confusion in relation to it, but for Gavin, I think that that type of work is permitted, but it has to be new build type of work. It has to be new construction sites, as opposed to going into somebody's house and renovating an existing house or putting an extension to a house where somebody is already residing in.
I have a question in here. I'm actually going to take this myself in relation to the current state of new Leaving Cert students, or the 2021 Leaving Cert students. We had a Q&A on Instagram last Thursday, and I think it's still online if people want to tune in, answer a number of questions. But this was one that came up because they're not being talked about very much, but they have lost, by the time the summer comes, they will have realistically lost 4 or 5 months of classroom time. So they'll be very much behind, and that's a time that really an awful lot of people an awful lot of the guts of the curriculum really is being covered. So I am pushing with the Minister that specific provisions are made for them, and that be taken account of when the papers are being set and in outlining the exam for next year, because I think much the same as this year's Leaving Cert can't be treated the same as any other year. Next year's Leaving Cert is not the same as any other years either. One of the issues, I suppose, in recent days that there's been a lot of focus on is in relation to childcare, and a lot of disappointment, I think, from frontline workers and healthcare workers. And I have a question for you, Mary Lou, from Jane, and she's asking, if the government can't get childcare for frontline workers now, how will regular families like ours manage as we return to work? Why does it have to be so hard for families and childcare workers alike?
Yes, and thank you very much for that question. I think it's fair to say that those questions could have been posed 6 months ago, even before COVID was with us, because we know that parents were dealing with amongst the highest childcare costs in the world. I mean, crazy second mortgage level costs. We know that there's over 25,000, I think about 27,000 childcare and early education workers. We know that their employment is precarious, it's seasonal. I mean, you know, they're signing on and signing off year to year over the summer months, and they're very low paid. So there isn't the proper career structure. So all of those problems were with us anyhow. And then along comes COVID, and here we are now. The government announced a scheme Thursday a week ago, to provide care for the children of our frontline workers. I think with the specific eye on people obviously in the health services. That scheme was announced on a Thursday, and by the following Wednesday it had collapsed. Now, those in the sector tell us that it collapsed for a number of reasons: lack of consultation, it seemed to be very poorly planned, they didn't talk to either the workers or the providers or the people in the health sector themselves, and so it came to nothing. The insurance provider said and had made clear to government from the word go that they could not and would not insure the additional risk, the COVID risk that they were calling it, that this scheme entailed. And yet the government motored ahead. I mean, it's quite an astonishing thing. I actually asked Leo Varadkar about this during the week, and asked him, did you know that there was this fundamental problem with the insurance issue? And he said, no. I find that kind of extraordinary. Anyway, that scheme isn't going to go ahead, so we need another scheme to replace it. I know that certainly the unions for nurses, for example, have ideas about how that might proceed. I know the childcare providers equally have ideas, and I cannot understand why weeks and weeks after we have entered into this emergency period that we're still without the scheme that's needed. Again, this can be fixed. I mean, we made the proposal that the state, the government, indemnify the COVID risk. You know, if the insurance industry won't. Certainly that is happening in the north, as Michelle and colleagues in the executive have set out. The Department of Health proposes to cover that section of the risk. So it needs to get sorted out. And again, this needs to happen quickly. We cannot be applauding people on the front line who risk their health and their lives day in and day out for us, and yet not do the basic things that allow them to get to work. The second part, I think, is one that requires real consideration now, because it's the wider issue now. As the economy reawakens and as we try to get people safely back to work, then the issue arises about childcare provision more generally. And I know I've been talking to childcare workers, early education workers and providers, even in my own constituency, and they tell me a number of things. Firstly, they're concerned about the insurance bit. Will they or will they not be covered for COVID risk? Now, Pearse, as ever, is on this issue of the insurance industry. It seems that the COVID risk in childcare settings will be covered. But even with that, providers still ask, well, what's my premium going to look like? Because remember last year, I mean, the premiums went through the roof to the extent that many of the childcare providers were saying, we're not going to be able to open our doors again. And the government had to intervene. I think people will remember that. So there's that issue. There's the issue of space and capacity. Like, you cannot realistically get toddlers and wobblers to physically distance. Do you know what I mean? That's not real. So therefore, the question arises, well, how many children will actually be able to go back into their early educational settings? And the view is that it might be half. So there's a capacity issue. And then there's the issue of cost. I mean, the same chestnut that we were dealing with, that we talked to people in the course of the election about, you know, people have lost their jobs, people have lost income. And there is a real fear, I know, from talking to parents and to families, a huge fear that even if you can overcome every other barrier, how in the name of God are we going to pay for it is the question. So we need a very, very careful, thoughtful exit plan for childcare and early education itself. As with the wider educational system, it's not enough, you see, to simply think out loud and say, sure, we'll open up the schools and childcare in the next number of weeks or months. That will have to be very carefully planned, and it's going to have to be supported by the state. Like, the government is going to have to intervene to ensure that childcare can open again, that we actually have providers that hopefully get to work, and to ensure then that we have the capacity to allow others to get back to work in other parts of the economy. So that's a really good question, a really, really pertinent question to have arisen. We're raising Kathleen Funchion, our colleague from Carlow Kilkenny, is very, very active on this issue, as are others. So this is something we'll be pressing, and I imagine Pearse is on the COVID committee, and this new committee that's been set up, and I imagine this is going to be a key issue. Preparation now in these times, so that we don't have a repeat of a scheme being announced on a Thursday and collapsing on a Wednesday. I mean, that would be an absolute disaster if that were to happen on a wider scale.
Absolutely, and I think it was one of the first issues when really things clamped down that this was an obvious issue that was going to arise. And it occurs to me, a lot of the issues that exist with childcare exist for education as well. Of course, we know that children are losing out and that, you know, despite the best efforts of schools and teachers, it's a very, very difficult situation for a lot of children and families. But in the same way as childcare, it needs to be safe, it needs to be the right thing in terms of health, and needs to be the right thing in terms of education. Pearse, tá ceistan goin seo ó Linda, tá sí croceist faoi Lani agus Tailig, le Dina faoi mí chumas, agus na Dina tá tuair dara dóibh. Linda's asking about carers and children and people with disabilities, and saying that families and families like ours have just been forgotten and that there's real burnout. So when are they going to be given any consideration?
Yeah, it's like the childcare scheme as well. About the same time as that was announced, or originally envisaged about 6 or 7 weeks ago, we also heard about SNAs being hired to reach out to children with disabilities. That still hasn't come to fruition. There's some moves taking place this week, but children have gone without that type of support for quite a while. And we have to remember, when we're talking about the disability sector, we entered into this COVID crisis at a time when the big issue there was that the government were cutting the funding to the disability sector by 1%, 20 million. They basically wanted the disability sector to find efficiency savings of 1%. And that means taking supports from children and from adults with disability. We now have, we use the word crisis quite often, but there is a major issue now in terms of the disability sector. Before this pandemic, we had a major problem in relation to respite care, where many carers, many families were not able to get that break that they needed to just recharge the batteries to help them support and care for their loved ones again. The release valve for many of them was their family, was their parents. That is no longer available as a result of social distancing. So we need to make sure that the number of things happen. First of all, that immediate supports are provided where they can to people with disabilities. The second is we need to make sure that there's a real plan on the other side of this to ramp up the type of respite, because there is a huge pent-up demand there. And the third thing is we need to make sure that funding is provided not just directly to services, but also there's a huge gap now in funding. You know, we've seen it with different services fundraising through the Late Show and other online appeals. But people are not able to be out there rattling the buckets, selling the pins, the usual charity events that people in the community do to raise money for these charities, because of the gap that's there within the state. So the state needs to step in a very serious way. This pandemic has forced us all, and while we're trying to save people's lives, it also provides us with an opportunity to reimagine the type of society and the type of Ireland that we have. So just like the childcare facility, we can't come back out of this with the same type of childcare provision that's disjointed, that's low pay for many people in the workers, and high on parents. We need to now look at the plan that Sinn Féin has in terms of making sure that that's a national public service over a period of time, and that's the type of transition. We also need to see the same in terms of disabilities. We need to make sure that supports are there, and that these children and adults aren't falling through the cracks and aren't getting the supports that they haven't been getting for far too long. Donnchadh. So there is major issues here, and I think what the sector wants is they want a plan, they want reassurance, they want to know that funding will be there, they want to know that challenges that were there before the pandemic are going to be overcome, and I think that can be done if there's a willingness there. We've seen how we've been able to make major changes in our health service in a very short period of time. There's huge willingness, there's an appetite there. We can do the same within the disability sector. It shouldn't be taking years or months to try and provide the type of services that are required.
Absolutely. I think it's fair to say that in many respects, the government or the state even has abdicated responsibility in terms of disability services over the years. And if ever there was a time to step up to the mark, now is it. Pearse, I'm going to stay with you because I have a few questions on economic issues and employment issues that you might be able to answer. So Fee is asking about the self-employed, saying that self-employed and sole traders are always forgotten about. Ken asking, why are small businesses getting more support in the north than the south? Where does Sinn Féin stand on this? And insurance, and this is an issue that's come up time and time again, Therese saying that small businesses haven't a hope with everything stacked against them. How do we tackle this?
Yeah, look, I think this is one of the big issues that we're facing, and this is when we talk about the support that we need to be providing for small businesses and micro businesses, and most of the 160,000 micro businesses are people who are self-employed, who are paying themselves a wage. We need to be taught that really is support for employees as well. And where the government are really falling down is that they're not providing the type of necessary supports that business need to give them the certainty that they'll be able to pick up their tools again or pick up their trade again on the other side of this, or that they'll be able to open their doors and re-employ the workers that they've had to temporarily lay off. Like, we have to remember that when we're dealing with economic crisis, and it is a huge economic challenge, there's no doubt about this, but it's different from other economic challenges. It's not that we allowed credit fueled property bubble to develop. It's not that there's a lack of demand there within the society. It's we forced these companies, these businesses, these traders to down tools, to lock up their doors so that they could keep their families, their community, and the wider society safe. The bills didn't stop coming in. The rent still had to be paid due. The insurance bills were there. There were other overheads, and there's a responsibility on the state to pick up some of those tabs. What we haven't got is the type of scheme that we've been advocating for in the south, which is there in the north, where, for example, Conor Murphy, the finance minister there, our colleague, has provided £10,000 sterling to SMEs. In those in affected sectors such as retail, hospitality, the leisure sector, then you have it's £25,000 sterling grants that are being made available. Now that's not unique to other jurisdictions. The same happens in Germany. Self-employed were provided with €5,000 or €5,000 grant straight away. If you were a small medium enterprise, your support ranged from 9,000 up to 25,000. The same happens in France and Spain and other areas. What we have done in this state is simply not enough. And there are businesses after businesses telling me that it's likely that they will not be able to reopen unless they provide government provides the grant support that Sinn Féin is advocating. That is the same type of regime that is there in the north. 10,000 for businesses right across the board, a back to business grant, and a 25,000 euro grant for those in the most affected sectors. That's the only way we can be sure that companies and small medium enterprises in West Donegal or West Cork or wherever they're located are able to reopen their door and take their employees back into work. They were good businesses before the pandemic, and they can be good businesses and great businesses after the pandemic. But it will not happen unless we provide the support and liquidity for them, and that includes the self-employed. In the north, for example, there's a scheme there, the hardship fund, that caters for those that fall through the cracks. It's important that the self-employed are supported throughout this period as well.
And Michelle, actually, that's a good place to bring you in, because we have a question on that, because obviously, the local businesses, small and medium enterprises, they are the lifeblood of the local economy. So we have a question in looking for an update on what the executive is doing and the department in the north is doing to support small and medium enterprises and communities.
Yeah, I mean, Pearse is absolutely right. I mean, businesses want to get through this, and I suppose the unfortunate reality is that some people won't make it through. And I think that there's an acknowledgement there, but our job is to try and support all these small, medium businesses to try and get them through this. So some of the grants that we've been able to bring forward have been very useful in targeting those people that need them. So the categories of £10,000 grant, £25,000 grant, for those people that fall through, didn't get through into those schemes. There's another hardship fund. So there's a whole range of measures there. But of course, there will still be people who will be left out, and we're still trying to work our way through that and trying to plug the gaps, if you like, that have been identified. I think that the fundamental question here is, whenever we come to build the economy in a post-COVID world, I think the serious question for all of us is, what kind of society are we trying to build? And that must be one that gives workers and families a break. And that must be one that takes on head on these issues that were prevalent before COVID, but are now obviously even more magnified. Those families that are now managing themselves, for example, with maybe having a child with a disability at home, forgoing any support from outside because they can't bring people in for fear of infection. But they're struggling right now to be able to get through this. These are the people that were struggling prior to COVID-19 and who are struggling even more now. So certainly for me, the big conversation that we need to have is what type of society are we building on the other side of this, and how are we going to make sure that we support those people who we've depended on to get us through this, the frontline healthcare workers, those working in our shops, stacking our shelves, those people that are actually on the front line now battling for us. And that needs to be the serious conversation, Donnchadh, I think we need to have.
Absolutely. And I think it reflects a point that Pearse made earlier, society can't go back necessarily to the way it was before. We need to move on from this to build a better society. Mary Lou, there's a lot of discussion over the weekend and in recent days and indeed in recent months about government formation, and obviously it's been a source of great frustration to us, the way that things have developed. So I have a number of questions for you that have come in. We've had dozens of questions on this particular issue. Peter asking, what can we do what can we, the people that voted for change, do to stop Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Greens grabbing power for the next 5 years? John asking if we've given up on asking why we're not involved in talks to form a government. We need change, we need you, we voted for you. And Lisa asking, saying that she hopes an election will go ahead because we deserve a leader in the party who are looking out for the people. And I really feel that should be you and your party. I agree with that, certainly.
So just to say very directly, Donnchadh, that
I think
what can we do to stop Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the Greens, as the questioner puts it, doing a power grab? I would say fundamentally is to not become demoralised and not to lose hope. You see, the calculation is this, it seems to me, with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and he said during the election, these have held power for now almost a century, and they're not going to loosen their grip, easily or readily. And they see Sinn Féin, and I don't mean this person, I don't mean me or Pearse or you, Donnchadh or Michelle, us as individuals. It's actually the people who vote for us, and they see this momentum for change where people told us in the election. The people came and told us, look, change needs to happen. You're it. Get ready because we want you to drive it. I mean, it was absolutely explicit. People voted for us to be in government. And so now the old two of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, as their kind of last throw of the dice, say, right, we have to keep these people out. And they openly brag that this is what they're at, which to me is kind of astonishing from those who would tell you that they are the poster boys for democracy and democratic standards. But anyway, that's what they have chosen to do. And their idea is this. Their idea is that if they keep us, Sinn Féin, out, they can actually keep the people out and they can stop the change. And that to me is their fundamental error, because I don't believe that this change can be stopped. And I'll tell you why. It's as simple as this, because the things that we discussed with people, the things that people mandated are things that absolutely need to happen. We cannot, as Pearse and yourself and Michelle have been saying, we cannot just revert back to the old way and say, all right, well, the crisis now with the virus is over. Let's just get back to business as usual. That's not an option. That's simply not on the table. I tell you what's also not on the table, and this idea, well, we'll get through this crisis by hammering just the ordinary working people and families and communities. That's not an option either. In fact, an approach like that of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, go that route and get away with it, would do more harm than good, would actually deepen the damage and the crisis that we're currently in. So change is the watchword, and that is still necessary, and that's driven, yes, by us as political representatives and leaders, but in the first instance, that's driven by people. So I would say to the question, what can we do? For God's sake, don't get demoralised. Don't lose the reality that we can still do this, and the kind of change that we discussed is the kind of change that we will deliver. So I'm not giving up on that. I'm saying to people, don't give up on that. We can't give up on that, and we won't. We're still in contact with others. So it's important that people realise that we haven't given up on anything. We're still talking to everybody who wishes to talk to us, and we're talking to them about a real programme for God, not a kind of fictional framework thing like Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, where they cut and paste Sinn Féin's election manifesto and tried to kind of pretend it was their own stance. But we have done very good work with others to actually identify areas of common interest and areas where we can make progress. And I am still determined that we are going to do that. And I want us to do that from government. I want Sinn Féin to lead a government for change. So the story isn't over yet, folks. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and the Greens are now talking to them, and the Greens have a decision to make. And I respect their right to make that decision, but I would caution them on this score. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael together is not change, and does not have the capacity to deliver the types of things that they know and we know Irish society absolutely needs. So let's see where this goes next. But we are ready, we are willing, we are able, and we are in contact with others. What we cannot do is control the actions of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who have decided that they wish to keep us and to keep change out. But I'll tell you one thing, all politics responds to public opinion. So perhaps the most powerful force in these times isn't so much necessarily what I or you, Donnchadh, might say, but it is the force of public opinion. So can I encourage everybody who's watching this or who will watch it, give Micheál Martin a ring and tell him what you think about this policy of exclusion. Get in touch with government buildings, the 500,000 people who voted for Sinn Féin, and tell them that you're not going to be disrespected or shut out in that way. That's a very, very powerful, very powerful thing. So it's game on. That's the reality. Don't lose hope. And even if they manage to slow the change down, they're not going to stop it. That's that, in my view. I think the people, not for the first time, are way, way ahead again of the political establishment. I think that's what's actually happened here.
I think, Mary Lou, when you look at the quality of our people, not just on this call, but across the board, the ability that exists, but also the willingness to serve. And if that's in opposition, then so be it. But you can be sure that our public representatives want the opportunity to serve in government and to show what we can do and to deliver. Pearse, tá ceiste go mó Aisling sa sí tá imní ar hí faoi Dina Óga agus an Tionchar Vega an Géir Céim seo ar Dina Óga. Aisling's worried about what impact this pandemic will have on young people. She works hard, was on a low wage, paying high rent with no chance of ever building a home. I think young people suffered a lot during the last recession. I think it's important that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I don't know how well think Carthy Gashin Boston, I guess, team and them nation at there, Vinyoga, team Jogi on the Flickery Day, or Vinyoga, so Hodge Smo at a small Heishlish, Marialer, well, and Pascal Taku, a Gahedi Margaret year Moraku, Gopper in Shoppy, I guess Boston, Austin, you could see machine, so to 5 in the morning, I guess Kaimer Red, like Ashling that not let then you be Ella Og, Yanni Sinn Féin, like Kinchi. Na Dinyoga na Gregini a basic umper willa and nan piano you and ignomiarta at one I guess ni when na motion cart na car a bishan and rud carta yenu you with ignomiarta there. So it's clear that young people are worried because they have seen what Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael did over the last 10 years, where the burden of austerity was placed on their shoulders. Many thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, forced to immigrate. And we still have that pain in many families where children still haven't come home and have settled in far-flung countries. And it was forced immigration at the minute. We don't have that. The government don't have that release valve that they would tend to use because of the restrictions. And there is talk of austerity. Even today, again, you can hear about, that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are going to talk about additional taxes. And you know that it's not going to be on those that have the shoulders to carry that burden. It's not going to be in the wealthy. It's not going to be the Apple taxes. It's not going to be the wealth taxes. It's going to be the ordinary punter again who can, and that's not acceptable. And Sinn Féin and our team, our enhanced team, will do everything we can to make sure that there will be no austerity and that young people are given the opportunities to thrive in a society that values everybody. And that's the challenge that we have. So I think it's also a concern for people in relation, many young people, because we've seen the high percentage of them who worked in retail, who worked in the hospitality sector. We also know that women have suffered most as a result because of their large number of presence in those two sectors that have been hit hard as a result of the pandemic. That it's crucial that the type of supports that Sinn Féin argued for that are currently there in the wage subsidy scheme and the pandemic unemployment payment are continued till the end of the year at the current rate. We know that the government are setting the mood music to cut those, to start to withdraw those type of supports. And I know Mary Lou's intervention forced the government to at least commit that they would be extended beyond June. But there are still many battles to be fought there to make sure that they're extended to the end of the year and extended at the rate that they're there to support those individuals. And again, it come back, Donnchadh, just finally I'll say this, it comes back to this thing again about low pay, about precarious work. And again, it is an opportunity because the pandemic exposed this. It exposed that the social welfare security net was not really a security net for the shock of hundreds of thousands of people losing their jobs. That's why emergency legislation was rushed in for wage subsidy schemes and increasing payments up to €350. So that is the type of support that we do need in the future, whether it's one person losing their job or 10 people losing their jobs or tens of thousands. You need a better security net. We also need better rights for workers, and that's why a living wage has to be a priority for politicians, and we need to make sure that is delivered within a short period of time.
Mary Lou, I have a question here that's just come in from Kellyanne, and it's very topical, and I know Louise O'Reilly has been very vocal on this. She's asking, can we please address why vital life-saving testing is being put on hold? Why are cervical smears not being done? This is putting thousands of women's lives at risk. No early detection, less chance of survival.
Yes, and this is a huge cause of concern. On the one hand, you have had people, I suppose, staying away nearly from the health system in terms of emergency departments and GP visits, because of the COVID concerns. But certainly the lack of screening is a matter of huge concern. And it needs to be rectified. You're absolutely correct to say that Louise O'Reilly has been extremely vocal on this, as have others, advocates and activists for people's health. And of course, the cervical screening is one area, breast check another, but equally other screenings for women and for men, life-saving potentially interventions for people's health are absolutely essential. I believe now there needs to be a determination to ensure that screening is carried out. We shouldn't be in a situation where you're reading that for weeks and for a month that no screening has happened. That's dangerous. And there is a worry, and it's been expressed repeatedly, including in the Dáil, that we could be storing up a whole pile of post-COVID hardship and heartache because of this. And so I think the message needs to go out to all of us to actually care for your health. If you are unwell, you do need to see your GP. If you need to attend a hospital with a stroke or heart attack, right, you need to go to a hospital. I'm conscious there's a fear factor, but you need to make sure you attend to it. And then the screening services have to resume. I'm assuming that there will be a considerable backlog now because of these delays. And again, that needs to be resourced. God knows we've enough experience at this stage to understand the value of screening, timely screening, screening and returning those results in a prompt manner to physicians and also to patients.
I think that's vitally important. That message goes out there that if people are worried about their health, they need to contact their GP. They need to engage with the healthcare service. I have a final question for you, Michelle, and it's from Aoife, and she's asking, the only way I see us recovering from this is working together. Why is there not more moves to harmonise things north and south and move towards an island-wide healthcare system and a united Ireland?
Well, Aoife's a very wise woman, and she makes a good point, because I mean, in terms of, you use COVID as an example, I mean, it just goes to show you like how it just makes such logical sense that we cooperate right across this island. The disease doesn't stop at any artificial border. I mean, it just travels in the same trajectory across this island, impacts on our people exactly the same way. So we need to tackle it in a joined up way. But the wider point about an all-island health service just makes sense. We've been making this point for long many's a day. You know, the wastage that there is in running two health systems back to back, you know, the cost of even maintaining two separate health services is just madness. And at a time, I think that when we now need to be thinking about building for that post-COVID world that we've been talking about, this is an area where it just clearly makes sense that what we need is one truly Irish National Health Service that actually serves everybody free at the point of delivery, and that's the health service that Sinn Féin will be working every day to build. I think the case is well made. There are some excellent examples of how we collaborate across the island. Children's heart surgery, for example, you know, one service across the island. It makes sense. It means that people and families get that specialised care. So we need to see a lot more of that. But an Irish National Health Service is where we need to get.
I think that's the vision we all aspire to. Unfortunately, folks, and Mary Lou, I'll bring you in for a final word just at the end. We're after running out of time. But while I'm waiting to go, I'll look and you'll catch the stop. Galore, so fresh, or meal a cash. So Sinn Quidva, a lot of interest, an awful lot of people watching. Well over 1,000 questions in at this stage. Our team will get back to people if you've asked a question if we didn't get to you tonight. So thank you very much for your engagement. This won't be the last, it's not the first, and we're going to keep on engaging with people through this crisis. We want to hear from you, we want to talk to you, we want to keep up the conversation. So Mary Lou, I'm going to give you the final word, but I might ask you to answer a question with as well, and it comes from Sorika, and she says, we will be living with the virus for a number of years. Myself and many others believe now is the time to reshape the economy and reprioritise the way we live. I love Ireland and want to raise my family here, but I want a fairer, more caring and stronger country coming out of this crisis. Do you agree? And how can that happen? I think that's a thread that's been through a lot of the contributions. So maybe. Well,
hallelujah to that, Aoife. I think all of us here in this conversation share that sentiment. And you know, the public health crisis, this coronavirus, pulled the rug from under all of us. I mean, which of us would have thought for a second 3 months ago that we would be in the circumstances that we are now, that as a measure of last resort, that the economy had to be closed down, that we had to stay in our homes, stay at a distance from our loved ones, do all of these extraordinary things, and yet here we are. And the crisis exposed, really in a very cruel way, a number of things and a number of huge flaws and fault lines across our society. So housing, for example, if there was anybody who before now didn't understand that shelter and housing is an absolute fundamental and necessary right, well, my God, I'm sure they understand it now, because your home is your sanctuary. It's the place where you keep yourself and your family safe, where you isolate if you have to. So the virus has exposed that in a really, really stark way, I think. And equally, we could point to our health service and the incredible work done at the front line. But let's face it, it's done with in-source. The argument that we had back and forward in the last all around not enough beds, and the government saying, no, we have enough beds. I mean, that's been put to bed, if pardon the pun. So we have two options. It strikes me there's two roads here, and we need to make a choice. The first road, and this will be the instinct of the political establishment, would be to manage the crisis and return to business as usual. That's option A. That's a bad choice. because there is another way, and that is to ensure in these hard times where all of the certainties that we have been turned topsy-turvy, that we actually avail of an opportunity to do exactly what you have described, to recast and reimagine our economy and our society for the better. And I want to emphasize, those of you who know me know, I'm not an pie in the sky kind of person. I'm a very practical person. We're very down to earth, practical people. This isn't some kind of fantasy land. These are real, achievable objectives. The security of a roof over your head, the right to see a doctor and have treatment when you need it, enough money in your pocket so you're not worrying night in and night out that if you get an additional bill that you're going to be in big, big trouble. Secure and decent work, the dignity of good work, to work hard and to deliver. These are the basics, Donnchadh. And yet it is these basic things that we need to get right for us to have our new Ireland. And our ambition is to do that and more with all of you right across the island. So in very difficult times, I think that last question, Donnchadh, actually more eloquently than I could hope to do, sets out actually the challenge for all of us. So challenge accepted. We're on for this. This is what we want, and we want all of you and so many more to be part of this, journey now. But we need to be sure that the right choice is made, and the right choice is for new politics and for change and for a new direction.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll leave it at that, and thank you very much, Deborah.
Very much.
Donnchadh.